Hello, and welcome to Film Bites, the podcast where a lad and his dad talk about films they've just watched. I'm Jack, the lad.
And I'm Andy, the dad. We're here to share our thoughts on the latest movies, classic favourites, and everything in between.
From blockbuster hits to indie gems, we'll give you our take on what's worth watching and what's not.
So grab your popcorn, get comfortable, and join us for some movie talk. Let's roll the intro music and get started. The first film that we've got to review this week, Black Lotus. This is an absolute little gem, so I'll just give you the story. Mm-hmm. An ex-Special Forces operative wages a one-man war through the streets of Amsterdam to rescue his friend's daughter from the local crime syndicate. So what can you say then, Jack?
Well, it's an action movie.
It is.
It has some action, yeah. I think this is going to be an interesting one because I didn't really know much about going into this, which is always the best way to go into a movie, if I'm honest with you. I didn't see any kind of trailers, I didn't see teasers, anything of the sort. So this is a 1 hour and 32 minute movie, I believe.
It's short.
Yeah. To put it bluntly, it's alright. It's got some very good choreography, I've got to say, in terms of the fighting scenes. The cinematography is absolutely stunning.
Yes.
That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a romp. There's no doubt about it. It is an absolute romp. I think, for me, this is very much a throwback to the early days of the 1980s, 1990s action pics. Your Jean-Claude Van Damme style approach. I know there's been a bit of a renaissance for this kind of stuff because of the likes of John Wick.
Yes, which has definitely created a kind of resurgence of this genre.
To compare this to John Wick is just, no, you can't. There's no comparison.
I think with John Wick, you've already got the idea in your mind. This is a man that is trying to get out of the business. He's now gotten out of this business and he's pulled back in. And you just see this action play out. It's amazing, it's fun, but also the emotion behind the character is actually there. It's not just mindless violence, which it is, but let's be honest. But there's also some depth to the character of John Wick, and there's a reason as to why he does this stuff. With this movie, Black Lotus, there is a reason, but there's a bit of flimsiness about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so embedded in some crazy sort of pseudo-European dialogue that you start losing track of what the plot really is.
Yeah.
You have some clunky dialogue that does bog down this film quite a lot.
Unfortunately, yes.
But that's not to say that there's not a lot of fun to be had with this film. I think it's one of those ones that you classified back in the day as so bad that it's good.
Yes.
And I can't fault some of the direction. I can't fault some of the action sequences.
They're really good, to be fair.
The main actor in this film is Rico Verhoeven. And I mean, the guy's built like a brick toilet, isn't he? Let's be honest. He is huge. But in terms of his actual character's presence from dialogue, it's left asking questions.
Yeah.
We understand right from the very beginning of a situation that happens that goes botched, that it's going to mean that he's a loner for a period of time. When he does finally sort of decide to go back into the real world, it just all turns to poo again, doesn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. That's the blunt way of putting it, yeah.
Arguably, the biggest star in the movie is Frank Grillo.
Yes.
He's not given lots to work with, let's be honest. He's the baddie, and he is a stereotypical baddie.
Very much so.
It's an old-fashioned type of mafiosi type, don't steal from the mafia because you end up dead kind of scenario.
Or we'll hold you to account by doing such and such.
Yes.
Involving your family.
And it is, a lot of this is very much by numbers.
A checklist, if you will.
Yeah. There was one character in this that we both sort of looked at and thought, he should be the next God of War on Amazon Prime.
Pretty much.
The actor's named Magnus Samuelsson, who plays a henchman, effectively, in this. He's very watchable, and he's probably got some good dialogue in there. But let's be honest, Black Lotus is a bit of a mess.
It's a mess, but you can't help but watch on. I think that's the way in which I've gone about it. It's hard to watch in the sense that the dialogue is very patchy. Some of the scenes that connect to one another are a bit strange. There are some flashback sequences that I didn't really remember. I think they were a bit forgettable. I liked certain elements of them, but that was about it.
Yeah, we have to have Matteo contractually obliged to take his shirt off
Yes.
on several occasions.
Yeah.
Not really sure why. There wasn't any particular
It was like something out
motivation.
of a Pepsi commercial in the 80s.
It really was.
He even took a swag of a water bottle in slow motion, topless, and it's just like, yeah, this reminds me of an 80s movie, but not the best 80s movie.
But putting all of the flaws that the film has aside, and there are a lot of them, we did find ourselves looking at each other and just smiling and laughing and
fair,
enjoying it.
I haven't laughed that much in a movie, to be honest with you, because of how absurd it all was, but that is the fun of it, I think. So yeah, I had fun with it.
I mean, the kills were gratuitous and in exactly the right kind of way for this type of movie.
Yep.
It is, as I say, it's so bad, it's good.
Yep.
It's very, very worth a watch.
Yes.
It's certainly going to not phase your evening if you just download it and watch it for 90 minutes. It is a lot of fun from that respect, but just don't expect too much from it because it is left begging when it comes to dialogue. There's some very strange musical choices in this.
Twice. Yeah.
We get some scenes of him running, we get some scenes of him jumping, we get some scenes of him crunching bones, we get some scenes of him doing this, that and the... Oh my goodness. It was like almost in places like an extended pop video.
It did feel like that.
But...
I wasn't annoyed by it, to be honest with you. It was just quite fun.
Yeah. So, summing up then, what are your thoughts?
It's alright.
Honestly, if you just have a bit of spare time, you're going to have a pizza night with the boys or whatever, I think this is the kind of film, if you like your Expendables type stuff.
Who is the director is actually directing the fourth Expendables.
Yeah,
which we'll see.
That's terrifying. But honestly, it's one of those films, get the lads in, get the beers in, just have a good fun time and watch Black Lotus. It's available on Prime and all of the other streaming services. I think it's a pay-per-view at the moment. This next film is quite a substantial difference from the first one that we've seen this week. And this one's called Medusa. Do you want to just give us the story, Jack?
In order to resist temptation, Mariana and her girlfriends try their best to control everything and everyone around them. However, the day will come when the urge to scream will be stronger than it ever has been.
I think that's quite a succinct way of putting this film. It's a film that really does take risks, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed most about it. So it's a foreign language film, subtitled, and it is visually quite eye-popping from the opening sequence.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've got a lot of elements that you would expect to see in the likes of a Dario Argento movie, such as Suspiria. There's a lot of elements that feel a lot like Gaspar Noé in terms of the way we choreographed certain scenes, and a cracking score to underpin everything that goes off on screen. Now, it's a longer film than the last one. It was over 2 hours. What did you think?
Again, like the last one, I had never heard of this one. Medusa, I already knew the name, of course. It spans from Greek mythology with different themes of opening Pandora's box and the elements of sin also playing out and the temptation of things. Which in a lot of ways with the setting of this movie, it does play out very similarly, which I found quite interesting because, as you pointed out, it's allegorical of everything that is playing out in the movie. And I don't want to spoil anything because this movie is, whilst sure you can spoil it, even then I wouldn't have understood from the spoilers. But I won't say anything, don't get me wrong.
I think that's a cracking way of putting it. I think the film is so original and so purposeful in what it wants to put on screen that it doesn't matter if we told you the ending, because I think everybody would probably take something different out of this film.
Yeah, it's definitely different perspectives that can be played around with this one. I mean, with a large element of it, there's a very heavy Christian view of things,
yes.
And with that, it's almost demanding of the young girls and everything that's going on around them.
I think the term's probably, it's quite a puritanical way of looking at certainly teenage life. and this almost cult-like temple that the main protagonist, Mariana, goes to visit. So we get this slowly emerging story of what happened to...
I believe it was either a pop star.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to remember the name.
Melissa.
Melissa, yes.
She was deemed to be quite promiscuous, and this sect takes it upon themselves to kind of form a part of retribution on her.
Correction.
Go on.
So, it seems that this sect was created from a form of retribution.
That's it.
From someone that was dressed as an angel.
Yes.
So they wear these masks that was almost like a replica to what happened to this girl, Melissa, which I won't go into the details of, but heavy elements of Medusa in the title I thought was playing out very similar.
And this emerging story builds and builds. Throughout we have superb lighting.
Lighting was really interesting.
We have superb direction, let's be honest. I think it was gentle in places, clever in places. The director of this, Anita Rocha de Silveira, it was a film that was, I think, in Cannes in 2021. And I'm surprised we've not heard more chatter about it, because it's got some genuine innovation in here.
Oh, definitely.
I loved the entire look of the film. The acting performances were really compelling.
I found them very believable.
From a cast of unknowns.
But that can sometimes be at its best.
And it was quite refreshing. The dialogue was clever, very intense. Again, this slow sense of foreboding all the way through. You didn't quite know where this journey was going to take you.
It certainly kept you guessing, and I assure you, if you guessed it, you haven't guessed right.
Correct.
We always found ourselves guessing something, feeling like we've gotten to a point where we understood it. And then they do something that's left field, but almost like you should have known it coming as well.
Yeah, I mean, it never lagged in any of it. It was a constant build, constant, this energising music underneath it, underpinning what was going on.
Felt like an 80s score.
Yes. Well, again, given that it's very Giallo-esque in places.
That would make sense.
It's not Goblin, but it could well have easily been a Goblin soundtrack from the late 70s, early 80s. But really polished and really precise. And I think it kind of gave that, again, when I say Gaspar Noé, it's got that underpinning element of art house, but done in the right way that doesn't take you down a completely wrong direction of it just surviving in an art house setting. I think it's something that general audiences will get something from.
Yes.
Even down to the extra bits of mystery towards the end. As we transition through the various phases of the story, the injuries, the place where she goes to work.
Yes.
Which is...
That setting of a hospital, it's odd. The entire sequences that play out in this particular hospital are, I would say, probably unnerving at points, because the hospital itself looks fairly dilapidated at points. It's not very clean, but at the same time it does look clean, if that makes sense. There's a weird blend that goes off between the two that doesn't seem quite right, and the people alongside it, they look clean, but within they're not right either.
Well, also the patients, there's an eeriness and, again, unsettling nature of coma patients.
Yes.
In the sense that they're alive, they're breathing.
They just can't do anything.
But they're just there, and they have to be treated and kept alive.
I've got to say, I don't want to spoil anything, but I do wonder what is going on with those patients after the movie. It definitely makes you go back. The more I think about it, the more I realise, hang on a minute, was that there for a reason? It's original. It feels very fresh on a take of, I would say, cult-like status in particular aspects of the movie. But that's not the heavy focus as such. It's a focus, but that's not the heavy amount. I've seen movies where a cult is the heavy focus and then the characters come second.
Yeah.
This felt very much like the characters come first with the aspects in the background. But they all feel so very important, and it's so well done. Very
necessary to the story, very necessary to the flow of what's happening on screen, and ultimately a build that takes you towards a crescendo of sorts. I thought this was a dazzling piece of cinema. Very, very worth taking the time to rent this one. It's actually going to be released on July the 18th on the video on demand services.
Yes.
So from my personal perspective, I think give this one a watch. I think it's going to take your time in terms of you're going to need to watch this film. It's not something that you can just gently put to one side.
Yeah, you can't pass it off.
It certainly isn't an all-out action piece. It's much more cerebral than a full-on horror. You will get something from this if you invest in the time in this movie, and I would definitely recommend it. Yourself?
100% agree. I think this is absolutely worth the watch. It's psychological at its best, and it's something that I genuinely find very refreshing.
Brilliant. The last film this week that we've had a look at is Supercell. Now, deep breath. We've got to get through this one, Jack.
Yep.
What did you think?
I can say one thing for sure. Score's really good.
Yeah.
Score reminded us very much both the John Williams scores that you'd hear in something like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, potentially even E.T. at points. But apart from that, I've got to say I don't usually get frustrated with movies, and this one was one where I just felt a bit frustrated and my senses completely just went off. I had lost focus during the movie, which is not a good sign. I'm not usually a person that gets distracted from a movie, but this was one of those ones where it just didn't click with me. It wasn't particularly investing, I'd say. The start of the movie was intriguing, following up from that, it kind of just felt flat.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, with regards to the score that you referred to there, the one key thing that I would say about it is, yes, it's the best part of this film, but also it felt like it belonged to another film.
Definitely.
It really didn't seem to go with what was going on screen. I mean, it's not the worst cast in the world. It's Alec Baldwin, Skeet Ulrich, and it was Anne Heche's one of Anne Heche's last performances. And to be honest with you, it's not her greatest performance, unfortunately. In fact, it's probably one of her weakest ones.
But to be fair, the material given to her, bless her,
the story was very weak. Supercell being about a big storm.
The forming of, yeah.
There's not really much good to say about it, unfortunately. The dialogue was very average, but I think there was a big lack of story. You had the opportunity to make this the kind of power that Twister had 20 odd years ago when it was first made, with arguably slightly better visuals than what we received in this one. It was just such a wasted opportunity. It by no means was a remake of Twister because of the nature of the story they were trying to tell.
The very little amount of it was a story, yeah.
Yeah, but you did find that because of the lack of coherent story, because you weren't invested in any single character at any one point, there was nobody that was likeable.
Not really, yeah. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah. So by the time you start getting into the action, which the music has already tried to get you into, but you're completely not there. You get to the action and you don't really care what happens when it happens. There's not enough visually on the screen to excite you or to remind you that you're watching a film about a powerful storm.
I've got to say, it's called Supercell, yet the movie probably has 5% storms. Well, to be fair, probably 10% storms. Let's just be nicer. And 90% dialogue. When you have storm movies and, they're chasing these storms, it's kind of encapsulating the family-orientated aspects of a storm chaser. You expect that there are some, tense scenes between family members. You expect that there are, powerful emotional scenes, but also quite scary scenes in the middle of a storm. When you're in those situations, that's tense. That is incredibly terrifying, and you should be feeling these emotions for these characters, especially in the kind of setting that they're in. But I just felt nothing. No. And I hate saying stuff like that, but it just left me empty.
You kind of felt you were drifting away from any of the story. So when you actually did bump back into it, it does all feel empty and rather pointless.
It almost feels like they've collected multiple pieces of media, like 80s and 90s movies, had a bunch of emotional scenes that were in those movies, put them into this movie, but did it as an entire movie. And they've put them all together like jigsaw pieces that don't fit.
Yeah.
So it's one emotional scene after the other that doesn't really make much sense or make you feel anything.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, I find, because I want to like this movie because the concept sounds fine.
Yeah.
But it feels a bit meh.
I mean, the concept sounds fine. The pack art is absolutely fine.
VFX were all right, to be fair.
The VFX were okay, but considering we're in 2023, I saw no particularly exciting differences to Twister all those years ago. The thing with that movie was you did have a likeable cast. You were invested in what was going on screen, and the special effects were powerful. And at the time, revolutionary. The score was also exciting. But this was just a jumble of things all put together, unfortunately. Now, we don't sit here slagging off movies because that's not really our shtick. But this is very difficult to find any kind of redemption in what you can say good about this story.
I always try and find myself on the middle ground of things. And I would say it is usually rare for me to immediately slam something or hate on anything because I always look at it from the respect of an artist has created something and I appreciate what they have done. It's hard with this one because it almost feels like there might be some heart in this somewhere, but I just didn't find it, and I just felt a bit meh, and I hate saying stuff like that.
I do wonder if the score that we really liked is actually one of the things that detracted from what was going on screen, because it just didn't seem balanced with the focus of the story.
It was a good score. It's just that there were times where it was placed, and you felt like something going to happen. No, okay, it's just him walking to a car, it's him walking out into a field, it's him running on a roof.
And there were audio cues that were like something big's going to happen.
Yeah, and nothing big happened whatsoever, and it just felt, well, that kind of fell flat.
So, Supercell, it's going to be, I think it's already on the pay-per-view now. In all honesty, I can't recommend this movie. I'd wait for it to go onto the free services.
I have to agree, sadly.
Okay, so to round up the podcast this week, we just thought we'd have a little bit of a chat about what's happening with the Flash movie.
Very, very different to what we've usually seen with superhero movies, let's say.
So we've had the disappointing news that they're going to be closing it in about 1,500 theatres, and that it's going to be going straight onto streaming as of next month.
July 21st, I think it was?
Yeah.
There's something along those lines, which is very quick.
For a movie, now we know that it was troubled at the beginning.
Yes.
But for a movie that's actually a good movie...
it's very good, I think, and I will stand by that point.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it when we went to see it. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that they've not got more faith in it.
I think The Flash has been a project where it's been in the works since, I believe, the 90s. You've obviously had your Batmans, your Supermans, so they wanted to do something a bit different, so they were even thinking about Justice League. And I believe that The Flash, I can't remember all the directors that were supposed to be involved, but there's been many that was heavily involved. The Flash went dead in the water after the 90s, and then there was a slight resurgence in talks at Warner Brothers in the 2000s because of all the things that were going off around superheroes again. So you had Brandon Routh's Superman coming in. Potentially he could be part of the Justice League, bringing that up as well. And there was a Justice League movie that was in the works with a Flash that was never made due to a writer's strike. Funnily enough, is currently happening. So that is interesting. We've only really seen the Flash in TV, I'd say. So animated forms, live action forms. And we finally got this movie after probably about 30 years in the making in terms of talks. And I thoroughly enjoyed what they did. Was it the best decision to do Flashpoint as the first movie? Probably not, but I still think it was a well done version. And there is a kind of culture now, and I've mentioned this previously when we were talking about The Flash, that it's almost like a hate culture for DC that's been embedded since, I would probably say, 2013 with Man of Steel. Obviously with qualities such as the Dark Knight trilogy. You're not going to top the Dark Knight trilogy easily. But that was never the aim. It was a new take on things.
Yeah.
So I respect Man of Steel.
They shouldn't have set that as a benchmark to do. They should just come fresh. This is our take now.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Exactly.
You're right. It felt like they were trying to play catch up to something that was absolutely spot on. But I really feel like The Flash is probably a victim of the hangover from everything that's happened with Zack Snyder and all of those projects that he was working with.
I also must say, Endgame.
Yeah.
It's a little stressful because I absolutely like and love what Zack Snyder does with his art direction. It's not favourable for many people. I know there's a lot of critics dislike his style of slow motion and cinematography that's very excessive.
Yeah, but that's always been there. I mean, Sam Peckinpah Westerns had all those kind of slow-mo shots and stuff.
But I always respected that art style because it felt very comic. And with Man of Steel, I think it's one of the best adaptations we've had of Superman. Henry Cavill is Superman. But so is many other people as well.
Yeah.
I think that's something that people need to consider.
He definitely owns the Man of Steel.
Exactly.
And encapsulates it really well. I mean, there were a couple of sequences in that movie that I wasn't overjoyed about seeing, but more of it was absolutely spot on than it wasn't. I mean, it was carnage.
Yeah.
In the final battle of the film, it
was literally injustice levels of carnage,
and I think that possibly could have been done with a little bit more toned down. But in terms of actual visual style, Zack Snyder's definitely got it.
Yeah,
I think we obviously had all of the fallout from when Joss Whedon took over.
Yes,
for Justice League, which produced a very different version of the film. Which at the time we thought
it was all right.
It was okay.
But we felt like something was missing. And even in the trailers, you thought, hang on, where's that?
Yeah. And you just felt coming away from it that you don't want a film that's just acceptable. You want a film that's going to wow you and make you want to see more of it. And I think going back to The Flash and taking away all the stuff that happened with Ezra Miller along the way, I think what you've got is just a really good, fun superhero movie.
Agreed.
It's quite densely plotted, but explains multiverse a lot better than we've seen in the Marvel movie.
I have to agree.
And I mean, there's been complaints about the CGI, but to be honest with you, so what? It doesn't really take away from what the story is trying to tell. It's just a fun, action-packed story, which sets its stall out very early on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just a lot of fun. And when we came out of it, we really enjoyed it. I mean, I think probably in the last podcast, we said that. We felt that.
We were excited nerds.
Yeah.
That was basically what it was.
So I'm just struggling to understand what it is that's genuinely stopped people from going to see this movie. They're still going to see Across the Spider-Verse.
Well, in fairness to Across the Spider-Verse, that's critically acclaimed from the first movie.
Yeah.
The Flash, the only thing that you can say is critical is probably, he was in that Justice League movie, but the problem is now you've got two different Justice League movies, and there are a majority of people that have seen the Whedon cut,
so
not Snyder.
Do you think then there's an element of it being a bit of just confusion from the casual fan?
I think there's a mix, and I will go into that as to why I think it's a mix. The mix is that the casual viewers, which I completely understand, is seeing it from the perspective of, okay, so we've seen the Whedon cut, there's this character called The Flash. He was introduced in BVS as a cameo, basically at a kind of gas station, was it, of some form? A shop where he basically used his powers, and that was that. That was a nice touch, I thought that was cool. And then the Whedon cut basically shows Ben Affleck's Batman interacting with him in a bit more of a silly way, and with an element of serious lines that Snyder clearly still left in there, but ultimately this Flash character was silly. I think that he was dumbed down very much from what his actual story was in the Snyder cut. So they've probably seen the perspective of a character that's probably a bit goofy and runs around very fast. And can't punch people, but knows how to push. He trips over whilst fighting Superman, so they'll keep that in because it's goofy. They've got to have the silly character. And there was this really ridiculous scene where they copied Age of Ultron, where he lands on Wonder Woman and its face into the breast area. It was bad taste. It wasn't a really funny joke, and there's obviously the dramas that have gone off behind the scenes with that movie. But there's that perspective. And going into The Flash, he's had a hiatus where he's been missing for a while. He only appeared in The Suicide Squad as a brief cameo, catching Captain Boomerang. And since then, we've basically had movies that have not shown Superman's face, that have clouded certain decisions that Snyder would have had. This character of Darkseid has never shown up. So there's this weird nightmare sequence where the Flash goes back in time of some form and tries to save Lois Lane. So there's this confusion because there's no coherency now. We've got Wonder Woman 84 that was a complete diabolical mess.
Yeah.
And I will say I absolutely did not like that adaptation of Wonder Woman.
It was a waste of all the performances. You've got some really good talent in that movie.
Yeah, Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, who's on fire in everything that he's in at the minute.
Yeah, that one was just, what have you done to him?
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot of redeeming features in that. And the news that they cancelled the third one, I think, was probably timely, given how bad that one was.
And yet people complained.
Yeah, I think that's more a reaction to the fact of how good Gal Gadot is, rather than the rest of what that film was about.
She's probably one of the best characters in the entire DCEU.
She's likeable.
Yeah. And the other side of it is the people that won't let go.
Yeah.
So, ever since Zack Snyder had to depart, after, the horrific tragedy that had essentially took place, I mean, it was, honestly, it was shocking to everyone. And it wasn't a pleasant situation, and I think that was, like many other people have said, Warner Brothers' beautiful opportunity to step in and make their own Justice League. And Snyder's vision at that point was decimated.
Yeah, it was.
And that's where it begins. It was Warner Brothers that destroyed a lot of Snyder's vision, and hearing more behind the scenes about the stuff that was going off, it doesn't help. So obviously, if you're going to have news articles saying Gal Gadot was being mistreated by Joss Whedon, and then you also had Ray Fisher had racist allegations against Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers heads, you have this distaste for what's going on.
Sour.
It's sour, and it is just, you don't feel comfortable with watching these movies if your main actors are feeling like they're not comfortable. And it might show in their performances. Which I think in some scenes of the Whedon cut you can see that there was some discomfort with certain things. Like Gal Gadot didn't seem comfortable in certain scenes, I'd say. And I've also got to say that you can tell that Momoa, I think, whilst he is an actor that is great and can adapt to things very quickly, he almost seemed rigid at points, because obviously one side of it was he was meant to be this serious character that doesn't want to be the King of Atlantis. And then there's the other side of it, which is, but I'm going to be the King of Atlantis, and my father's alive, by the way. But in Snyder's version, he's dead. So there's no coherency with Aquaman now. It confuses people. And then, I'll try and keep this brief because I realise I'll ramble, but
No, you're on point.
You then have, after that Aquaman, that already was a completely different direction to what was supposed to be going on. And with Aquaman at the time, we wouldn't have known it, but Mira is also Amber Heard. I don't particularly like Amber Heard. I'll try and watch Aquaman 2, with this.
Well, you'd have to say, speaking of Aquaman 2, that given that Shazam has bombed,
oh gosh,
The Flash has also gone the same way.
Yeah.
And the next one, well, we've got Blue Beetle in between that.
Yes.
Which hopefully gets a bit better reception.
I really hope it does, because this is a Hispanic character as well that doesn't really get to have his time to shine. I was introduced to the character of Blue Beetle in Brave and the Bold, the Batman series that was on Cartoon Network, and I hadn't really heard of him before then. I knew about him briefly with things, but there he was. He was a good character. He was very good with his comedic timings. He actually had a very good dynamic with Batman, which I would love to see with the new Batman, and I thought that he was great. And the origin story was fascinating as well, and the scarab that is attached is something entirely interesting as well. But I don't want to go too heavy on Blue Beetle.
So I mean, that one we've got a little bit of hope for.
Yes.
But you'd have to say releasing the second Aquaman movie around Christmas time this year.
That was a poor decision.
Could you be any less excited for this movie now?
The problem is that where The Flash has ended as well, it doesn't make you feel excited about Aquaman because you don't really care.
Let's talk briefly about that. That was a woeful after-credit sequence. It's completely without point. It wasn't funny.
No, it wasn't.
And if that's your build for the next movie featuring the main character, you've just got to say, what are you doing, lads? You know, come on.
I've also got to say, I can guarantee you what was a post-credit scene that was taken off.
Go on.
What movie was cancelled? Batgirl.
Of course. Yes,
Batgirl
of course.
was hyped.
And also that was going to be another crossover for Keaton, wasn't it?
It was. Keaton was the main Batman. And obviously we have now seen what is to be the case in that universe. And it is conflicting. It all blends together with the fact that nothing at Warner Brothers made sense. This idea with Dwayne Johnson being The Rock was formed back in the early 2000s as well, and that movie was never made because of, I don't know if it was scheduling issues, but I think it was just the script wasn't ever right and the directors kept changing and the budgets weren't coming through properly. Plus, Dwayne's budget was going higher because he was becoming a more popular actor.
Yes.
So, with that, there's going to be conflicts. So when they finally got to nail down, oh yes, we can do Black Adam, it was amazing. It was exciting. It was something that maybe this could actually be the big step in DC that we really needed. And
then the trailers happened.
It was like a 2000s movie that just didn't land. And it felt so frustrating when the leaks happened, where we knew about Superman. Henry Cavill's back. Man of Steel. He's got his red and blue suit. Already that should be your red flag. Your red flag there is, hang on a minute. So they're not doing the Snyder Cut. They're doing the Whedon Cut. That should tell you all that if you're a Snyder fan, you're not getting your universe back. Stop clinging on to a dead horse at this point. It is sad to say that because I would have loved to have seen what would have been the Snyder universe. We have rough ideas of the New Gods that was a cancelled movie as well, showing all these great gods and even Darkseid at his best, you know, an annihilator of worlds, someone that would extract your life within an instant. And we even saw that scene, that amazing battle at the very beginning where it was showing all these gods fighting Darkseid. But the only thing with the Snyder universe is that there was going to be decisions that I don't think many people would have agreed with, and I will say on that part, slightly, Warner Brothers I think made a good call. I don't think the idea of Zeus and Ares being Kryptonian was a good idea. I also don't think what was a good idea was the potential factor of revealing Lois Lane was the key because she had the baby of Batman. That was a whole story arc that I was not down with. I thought that was very strange. I respect risks, I always do. But when you do things that are going to be out and out controversial for the sake of being controversial, that is where it's a problem.
And that will annoy your target audience.
Yeah. And the thing is that double standards are apparently not a thing for people nowadays with DC. They'll say that they absolutely loved the movie. As soon as they go on Twitter, absolutely hated it. I honestly don't understand why they did these such and such and such. And I will say, it's frustrating in the sense that any time you go on Twitter, it's like anyone that has an opinion that is positive needs to be downgraded, needs to be hated. It's this hate culture that I was referring to last time that is just vulgar. It is awful. And I think this is where it stems from. It's the Flash's bad time to release that hasn't helped. It's this time of uncertainty with the new DCU. I think that people are seeing it from a perspective of, well, if they're going to reboot the universe, why should I watch this movie? I was actually wanting to watch this movie not just for The Flash, but also maybe this is where they reboot the universe.
And it gives them an out for
will
it.
Tease.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an out. But then you were confused as to why Aquaman was after the fact. I actually think, because if this is what the Flash is going to have with a bomb, it is an absolute bomb. Aquaman's probably going to suffer the same fate.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Aquaman was viewed as a absolute commercial success for Warner Brothers because it got, I believe it was like 1.2 billion.
Yeah.
And it was insane. It was a DC movie that's not really ever had that before.
But it's not been testing particularly well on its test screenings.
And
They've
that
reshot certain
will
points.
affect. That's the problem. We've heard test screenings about The Flash. They were positive, overwhelmingly so. But that still didn't bring people to the cinemas.
Yeah, it's good. It's going to be a hard job for James Gunn when he finally does get there. And obviously, the news this week's come out that the actors for the main two parts in Superman Legacy have been cast.
And I am actually very happy. Don't get me wrong. I've always had my opinions about who I wanted to be Superman and Lois. I'm happy about Superman. Looks the part. I've seen certain performances, little clips online, and I think, oh my god, that's Clark Kent and Superman.
Yeah.
There. And I haven't seen any clips of the actress that's playing Lois Lane. I will have to because...
So that's Rachel Brosnahan, and David Corenswet is the one that's going to be Clark Kent.
I need to see Rachel's performances because I haven't really seen her much.
I think she was in a show on Amazon.
Miss something.
The Marvellous Mrs. Maisie or
Yes.
something. Miss Maisie.
Yes.
Which I've not really seen, to be honest with you, so I also can't pass judgment. But certainly the casting and looking at them, I can see them. I can see them in that role. There's a poster that was previewed for Superman Legacy, and I just thought that David Corenswet looked exactly like the one on the poster.
The Superman All-Stars.
So I can really see that being good. And also the fact that there's some rhetoric coming about that it's going to be a lot more fun. That it's going to be lighter than what we have
needed, but at the same time, it needs to be that right level of fun and light and hope that Superman gives with the dark.
Yeah.
Because DC, at the end of the day, is the darker comic book side of things.
Yeah.
And I think we need dark, but not too much dark.
And let's be honest, multiple strands of the same story. This is one of the key ingredients that makes DC kind of difficult to come into as a newbie.
And I've got to say, DC has an opportunity here which will absolutely blow everything out the water if they can nail it. If Superman Legacy does well, they'll continue this universe. And do you know what the beautiful part is? It's gods and monsters. Does it say anywhere multiverse?
No.
Because what's Marvel been doing? Multiverse. Any way you can think, multiverse. The only thing recently that we've got is Secret Invasion, which hasn't dealt with any multiversal or superhero dynamic, and I love it.
I love the show, but it's also not getting the viewers.
Is it not?
No. It's one of the... I think it's either the second lowest audience figure for a new Marvel show or the lowest audience figure for a new Marvel show. And it's just brilliant. I mean, I don't get me wrong, there's still bits that could be tweaked here and there, but you're getting an hour of a good, solid story that's acted by really top actors. And they've got some great actors in this. I just think whatever needs to reset with all of this needs to reset quickly. Otherwise, we're going to be left with the conundrum that if people aren't watching this stuff, and if people aren't going to the cinema to see this stuff, then we're not going to get the chance to see this stuff on the screen because nobody's going to want to put that kind of money into it.
And the sad part is that there's now this culture of, well, I can just watch it at home. And that is not... No, you're missing a very large point of what cinema is.
Yeah.
It is that feeling of being extracted from the seat in a dark room surrounded by people and then finding yourself in this movie, enjoying it, finding the thrills and the characters and the suspense and the dialogue and anything that's just so powerful.
I think one of the key problems of having the pandemic was that I think people have forgotten how to go out and enjoy themselves at the cinema.
It's now every man for themselves. I mean, it is selfishness.
Even new products. I mean, like there was, I think Netflix had a show that just started getting into its own. It was called Jupiter's Legacy.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. It wasn't strong though.
It was going to be.
It was getting there, but it took its time to build.
Let's be honest, the last 4 episodes were up there.
They were actually very impressive and the visuals were stunning.
But again, curse of Netflix, cancelled after one series. You're not going to get to see any of that again. So
the problem with streaming services is, yes, you can watch it at home and it's very convenient, but you're not going to have that reliability Because with studios such as Warner Brothers, Marvel, Disney, they will put their movie out there. I mean, maybe not Warner Brothers, because apparently they'll cancel Batgirl, which, by the way, I actually did want to see what they'd do with that. But
they'd spent, what, $70 to $90 million on it, and it only needed some CGI work doing on it.
And that was it, yeah. And
a Scooby-Doo movie as well that they cancelled.
Which
Halloween.
Was finished.
Yeah.
It was completely done.
And they just
Voice
deleted it off all the servers.
It didn't make sense. And it was infuriating. Which is why, if you put these things on Netflix, on Amazon Prime, on Now TV, anything that is a streaming service, well, you're going to be in the situation where, and forgive my analogy, but if you have, let's say, a video game console, you can buy things digitally. It's very convenient. But the next thing you know, they could take it off the store. You can't buy that again. You can't play it again unless you have the physical edition. So when you actually have this physical thing where you can just go to see it, or you hold these things like a DVD, you can keep these things.
Yeah.
But the problem with streaming services is that they'll take that from you and you won't have a choice in the matter.
And what we've also found with some services like Apple is that if they decide to delete that title and you've bought that title, it'll be deleted from your archive, and you can't have your money back.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
That's absolutely shocking.
It's disgusting is what it is, and it completely takes away the point of what cinema is at the end of the day. It is just... We're in a time that's worrying for cinema, and it is sad that we are seeing a lot of people just hate on things, not seeing things, actively going out of their way to say, don't watch this, because it is killing the industry.
So I think the final thought here is, if you want these superhero movies and big movies to continue, get your ass to the cinema and watch them.
I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. Please do subscribe if you like what we're doing, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.